The gunshot split the morning silence like a thunderclap, and Hannah Foster dropped the bucket of well water she had been carrying, her heart hammering against her ribs as she watched three riders thunder past her small homestead just outside Apache Junction, Arizona. It was the spring of 1883, and trouble seemed to follow the wind across these dusty plains. She stood frozen on her porch, watching the dust settle back onto the road, her hands still trembling from the shock. The bucket lay overturned in the dirt, precious water soaking into the ground, but she could not bring herself to care about that just yet. Her father had been dead for 6 months now, and every sudden noise reminded her just how alone she was out here. A 22-year-old woman trying to keep a failing ranch together with nothing but determination and stubbornness. The next Monday morning, Hannah woke before dawn as always and went about her chores. She fed the 3 remaining chickens, checked on the 2 horses in the small corral, and hauled water from the well. When she finally climbed the 3 wooden steps to her porch to go inside for breakfast, she stopped dead in her tracks. There on the weathered board sat a small bundle of wildflowers, tied together with a piece of rough twine. Purple verbena, golden brittlebush, and delicate white desert chicory created a modest but vibrant bouquet. She looked around, scanning the empty landscape in every direction, but saw nothing except the usual sage and mesquite stretching toward the distant mountains. Hannah picked up the flowers carefully as if they might vanish like a mirage. They were fresh, still cool with morning dew. Someone had been here, right on her porch, while she was doing her chores. The thought should have frightened her, but instead she felt something else, something she could not quite name. She brought the flowers inside and placed them in a chipped ceramic pitcher filled with water, setting it on the small table where she took her meals alone. The following Monday, it happened again. She had been more watchful this time, rising even earlier, but somehow between feeding the animals and returning to the house, another bundle of wildflowers had appeared. This time they included Indian paintbrush, scarlet and vibrant against the white petals of desert marigolds. Again, no note, no knock, no sign of who had left them. Hannah sat on her porch steps that morning, coffee growing cold in her cup, and studied the flowers with a mixture of confusion and something that felt dangerously close to hope. By the 3rd Monday, she had begun to expect them. She found herself rushing through her morning chores, eager to see what variety of blooms might be waiting. This time, there were pink fairy dusters and yellow paper flowers, arranged with surprising care. Hannah realized that whoever was doing this knew the desert well, knew which flowers bloomed when and where to find them. This was not the work of a town merchant or a traveling salesman. This was someone who spent time out in the wild places, someone who noticed beauty in the harsh landscape. She asked around town that afternoon when she went in for supplies. The general store owner, Mr. Patterson, a portly man with mutton chops and perpetually stained apron, shook his head when she mentioned the mysterious flowers. Mrs. Chen at the boarding house, who seemed to know everyone's business, simply smiled knowingly but offered no information. Even rough old Sheriff Dawson, who had tried several times to convince Hannah to sell her property and move into town where it was safer, claimed ignorance. "Could be any number of fellows," the sheriff said, leaning back in his chair outside his office, his boots propped on the railing. "You are a pretty young woman living alone, Miss Foster. Bound to attract some attention, though I wish you would reconsider my offer to help you find a buyer for that land. It is not proper, a lady living out there by herself." Hannah bristled at his words. "My father left me that land, Sheriff, and I intend to keep it. As for proper, I have managed just fine for 6 months. Managed, maybe," he said, "but not thrived. "No offense meant, Miss Foster, but that place is falling apart. You need a husband or at least some hired help." She left before she said something she might regret, her cheeks burning with anger and embarrassment. The sheriff was not entirely wrong. The ranch was struggling. She had sold off most of the cattle just to pay her father's debts, and what remained barely sustained her. But it was hers, the only thing in the world that belonged to her, and she would not give it up easily. The fourth Monday brought purple lupines and white evening primrose. The fifth Monday featured scarlet hedgehog cactus blooms and desert bluebells. By the sixth Monday, Hannah had begun leaving the pitcher empty and ready on the porch railing, a silent acknowledgement of the gifts. She found herself thinking about her mysterious admirer constantly, wondering who he was, what he looked like, why he never knocked or left a note. The wondering kept her company during the long, lonely days. On the seventh Monday, she decided to try to catch him. She woke in the darkness well before dawn, dressed quickly, and positioned herself in the barn with a clear view of the house. She waited as the sky slowly lightened from black to deep blue to pale gray. Her legs cramped and her eyes grew heavy, but she forced herself to stay alert. Yet somehow, impossibly, when she finally emerged as the sun broke over the horizon, there on the porch sat another bundle of flowers. Orange globe mallow and pink desert sand verbena this time. She had not taken her eyes off the house for more than a few seconds, and still she had missed him. Hannah laughed then, a real laugh that felt strange after so many months of grimness. Whoever he was clever. Part of her wanted to feel violated by this persistent presence, but she could not manage it. The flowers were gifts, freely given, asking nothing in return. In a world that had taken so much from her, here was someone offering beauty for its own sake. The eighth Monday brought yellow brittlebush and white desert stars. The ninth Monday featured purple scorpion weed and golden desert marigolds. On the 10th Monday, Hannah woke to find not just flowers, but also a package wrapped in brown paper. Her hands shook as she unwrapped it to discover a small sack of coffee beans, the good kind that she had not been able to afford in months. Still no note, still no knock. She brewed the coffee immediately, and the rich aroma filled her small house like a benediction. She sat on her porch sipping it slowly, savoring every drop, and for the first time since her father's death, she felt something like contentment. Whoever this man was, he paid attention. He had noticed that she drank coffee every morning, probably seen her buying the cheapest variety at the general store. This gift said he cared about her comfort, her small pleasures. The 11th Monday brought pink fairy dusters and scarlet Indian paintbrush, along with a jar of honey. The 12th Monday featured white evening primrose and purple verbena, accompanied by a small bag of oats for her horses. Hannah stood on her porch that morning, holding the oats, and felt tears prick her eyes. She was not alone after all. Someone was watching over her in his own strange way. On the 13th Monday, Hannah woke with a sense of anticipation that she had not felt in years. She did her chores quickly, then settled on her porch steps to wait. The flowers were there as always, yellow paper flowers and orange globe mallow, but this time there was also an envelope. Her heart raced as she opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sentence written in a neat, masculine hand. "I hope these flowers have brought you some happiness." No signature, no name, just that simple statement. Hannah pressed the note to her chest and felt something break open inside her, something that had been locked away since her father died and left her alone in this hard world. Yes, the flowers had brought her happiness. More than that, they had given her hope. The 14th Monday arrived with the force of a revelation. Hannah had been counting the weeks, had known this one was coming, but she still was not prepared for what she found. The flowers were there, a particularly beautiful arrangement of scarlet hedgehog cactus blooms, pink desert sand verbena, and white desert chicory. But standing at the end of her dirt path, hat in hand, was a man. He was tall and lean, dressed in worn denim and a faded blue shirt, his face shadowed by the early morning light. He made no move to approach, just stood there as if waiting for permission. Hannah felt her breath catch in her throat. For 14 weeks she had wondered, and now here he was. She walked slowly down the porch steps, her bare feet silent on the sun-warmed wood. As she drew closer, she could see him more clearly. He looked to be about 25 or 26, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes that were either gray or blue. She could not quite tell in the slanted morning light. His face was weathered from sun and wind, with lines around his eyes that suggested he spent most of his time outdoors. There was a gentleness to his expression that surprised her, a softness that seemed at odds with the hard country around them. "Good morning," he said, and his voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "My name is Nathan Norwood. I am the one who has been leaving the flowers." Hannah stopped a few feet away from him, suddenly aware that she was still in her nightgown with only a shawl thrown over her shoulders, her hair loose and unbrushed. She should have felt embarrassed, but instead she felt oddly free. "I am Hannah Foster, but I suppose you already know that." "Yes, madam," he said. He turned his hat in his hands, clearly nervous. "I apologize if I have frightened you or made you uncomfortable. That was never my intention." "Why?" The question burst from her before she could stop it. "Why the flowers? Why every Monday? And why did you never knock?" Nathan looked down at his boots, then back up at her, and she saw something raw and honest in his expression. "I saw you that first morning when those riders went past. You looked so startled, so alone. I wanted to do something to help, but I did not know what. I work a claim up in the hills, panning for gold mostly, not making much. I do not have money to offer, and I did not think you would accept help from a stranger anyway. But I noticed the flowers out there in the desert, and I thought maybe they could bring you a small bit of joy." "Every Monday," Hannah said softly. "I come into town every Monday for supplies," Nathan explained. It seemed like the right day. As for not knocking, well, I did not want to presume. The flowers were just meant to be a gift, no strings attached. I did not want you to feel obligated to thank me or talk to me or anything else. I just wanted to give you something good, with nothing expected in return." Hannah felt her throat tighten with emotion. In a world where men like Sheriff Dawson tried to pressure her into doing what they thought was best, where everyone seemed to want something from her, here was a man who had given freely for 14 weeks without asking for anything at all. "That is the kindest thing anyone has ever done for me," she said. Nathan's face brightened, and she realized he had been genuinely worried about her reaction. "I am glad. I worried sometimes that maybe it was strange, maybe you would think I was some kind of fool." "Not a fool," Hannah said. "The opposite of a fool." She paused, then added, "Would you like to come in for coffee? I still have some of the beans you left. It is the least I can offer after all you have done." He hesitated, glancing toward the house, then back at her. "I would not want to compromise your reputation, Miss Foster. People talk. People have been talking about me since my father died," Hannah said with more bitterness than she intended. "Let them talk. I would like to thank you properly, and I would like to know more about the man who has been so thoughtful these past 14 weeks. Nathan's smile was like sunrise, slow and warm and illuminating. "In that case, I would be honored." They walked to the house together, and Hannah was acutely aware of his presence beside her, the way he matched his stride to hers, the careful distance he maintained. He was a gentleman, despite his rough clothes and work-hardened hands. She realized she had been half afraid that meeting him would break the spell, that the reality would not match the fantasy she had built up in her mind. But if anything, he was better than she had imagined. Inside, Hannah busied herself making coffee while Nathan stood awkwardly near the door. "Please sit," she said, gesturing to the small table. "You do not have to hover there like you are ready to bolt." He laughed, a warm, rich sound that filled the small space, and sat down. Hannah noticed him looking around the sparse room, taking in the patched curtains, the worn furniture, the general air of poverty held at bay by determination alone. She felt a flash of embarrassment, but when she met his eyes, there was no judgment there, only understanding. "You have kept this place going all by yourself," he said. It was not a question. "I have done my best," Hannah replied, pouring coffee into 2 tin cups. "Some days my best does not feel like enough." "From what I can see, your best is remarkable," Nathan said. He accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. This is not easy country for anyone, let alone a woman alone. Hannah sat across from him, wrapping her hands around her own cup. "You said you work a claim in the hills. Gold?" "Mostly copper, actually," Nathan said. "Not the riches men dream of, but enough to get by. I have a small cabin up there, nothing fancy. I prefer it to town living. Too many people, too much noise." "I know what you mean," Hannah said. "My father used to say that the desert teaches you to be comfortable with silence. You have to be, or you go mad." "Your father sounds like he was a wise man." "He was," Hannah said softly. "He taught me everything about this land, how to read the sky for weather, how to find water, which plants are good and which will kill you. He taught me to be strong. I just wish he had taught me how to be strong without him." Nathan was quiet for a moment, then said, "I lost my parents when I was young. Cholera back in Kansas. I understand that kind of loss, that feeling of being adrift. It gets easier, but it never really goes away." They talked for over an hour, the conversation flowing easily between them. Hannah learned that Nathan had come west 5 years ago, had worked various jobs before finally settling on his claim. He loved the desert, loved the stark beauty of it, the way it demanded respect. He read books when he could get them, poetry especially, which explained the care with which he arranged the flowers. He had never married, never even come close, too busy trying to make his way in the world. Hannah told him about her childhood, about her mother who had died when she was young, about her father who had been both parents to her. She told him about the struggle of the past 6 months, the constant worry about money, the loneliness that sometimes felt like it would swallow her whole. She found herself saying things she had never told anyone, and Nathan listened with an attention that made her feel truly heard for the first time in months. When he finally rose to leave, the sun was high in the sky, and Hannah realized the entire morning had passed. "I should go," Nathan said. "I have kept you from your work long enough. Will you come back?" The words were out before Hannah could stop them, too eager, too needy. She felt her cheeks flush, but Nathan just smiled. "If you would like me to, I would be happy to. I could come by next Monday if that suits you. Maybe help with some of the heavier work around here if you will let me." "I would like that very much," Hannah said. Then, gathering her courage, she added, "You could come by any day, not just Mondays, if you wanted to." Nathan's smile widened. "I would like that too, very much." He left then, and Hannah stood on her porch watching him walk down the path and disappear into the distance. She felt lighter than she had in months, as if some great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The world suddenly seemed full of possibility. True to his word, Nathan returned on Wednesday. He brought no flowers this time, just his presence and a willingness to work. He fixed the loose boards on her porch, repaired a broken fence post, and helped her move a pile of lumber that had been sitting untouched for months. They worked side by side in companionable silence, broken occasionally by conversation. Hannah found herself watching him when she thought he was not looking, admiring the easy competence with which he moved, the strength in his arms, the concentration on his face. On Friday, he brought fresh bread from the baker in town, and they ate lunch together on her porch. On Sunday, he helped her fix the roof of the chicken coop. By the following Monday, when he arrived with another bundle of wildflowers, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "You do not have to keep bringing flowers," Hannah said, though she took them gratefully. "You are giving me so much already." "I want to," Nathan said simply. "Besides, I like finding them for you. Makes me notice the beauty that is out there, things I might otherwise walk right past." They fell into a pattern over the following weeks. Nathan would visit 3 or 4 times a week, always bringing something, a small gift or just his time and labor. He never presumed, never pushed for more than Hannah was willing to give. But slowly, gradually, the space between them began to close. One evening in late May, they were sitting on her porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The temperature had finally dropped from the brutal heat of the day, and a slight breeze carried the scent of creosote and sage. Nathan had spent the afternoon helping her plant a small garden, something she had not had the energy or resources to do on her own. Her hands were dirty and her back ached, but she felt more content than she had in a long time. "Nathan," she said quietly, "why did you really start leaving those flowers? The truth this time." He was silent for a long moment, staring out at the darkening landscape. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and earnest. "The truth is, I saw you that morning and something in my chest just squeezed tight. You looked so beautiful and so sad, and I wanted to take that sadness away. I have never felt anything like that before, that immediate need to protect someone, to bring them joy. I told myself it was just kindness, just being neighborly. But even then, I think I knew it was more than that." Hannah's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. "And now," Nathan turned to look at her, and in the fading light his eyes were dark and intense. "Now I know for certain that I am falling in love with you, Hannah Foster. I have been falling a little more every day since that first Monday. I am not a rich man and I cannot offer you much beyond myself, but what I have, what I am, it is yours if you want it." The world seemed to hold its breath. Hannah felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, happy tears. "I want it," she whispered. "I want you." "I have been falling too, though I tried to tell myself I was being foolish. But there is nothing foolish about this, is there?" "No," Nathan said, and his voice was rough with emotion. "Nothing foolish at all." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her cheek with his hand. His palm was rough with calluses, but infinitely gentle. Hannah leaned into the touch, closing her eyes, savoring this moment of perfect connection. When she opened them again, Nathan was looking at her with such tenderness that it made her breath catch. "May I kiss you?" he asked. "Yes," Hannah breathed. He leaned in slowly, and when his lips met hers it was soft and sweet and full of promise. Hannah felt something inside her unfold like one of the desert flowers he brought her, opening to the light. The kiss deepened, became more urgent, and she reached up to tangle her fingers in his hair, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted. "Then why did you wait so long?" Hannah asked, half teasing, half serious. "Because I wanted you to be sure," Nathan said. "I wanted this to be right." "It is right," Hannah said firmly. "This is the most right thing I have felt in a very long time." They sat together as the stars came out, Nathan's arm around her shoulders, Hannah's head resting on his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, strong and steady, and it felt like the most secure sound in the world. For the first time since her father died, She did not feel alone. As spring turned to summer, their relationship deepened. Nathan spent more and more time at the ranch, helping Hannah with the endless work that came with running the place. Together, they accomplished far more than she had been able to alone. They repaired fences, tended the animals, and coaxed vegetables from the small garden. The ranch began to look less desperate, more cared for, but more than the physical help, Nathan gave Hannah something she had been missing: partnership. He listened to her ideas and offered suggestions without condescension. He deferred to her knowledge about the land her father had taught her to read. He treated her as an equal, a rarity in a world that seemed to think women needed constant guidance and protection. One afternoon in mid-June, they were working together in the garden when a group of riders approached. Hannah recognized them immediately: Sheriff Dawson and two of his deputies. Her stomach tightened with anxiety. The sheriff had left her alone for the past few weeks, but his arrival now could not mean anything good. "Miss Foster," the sheriff said, tipping his hat. His eyes lingered on Nathan with obvious disapproval. "I see you have taken on some help." "This is Nathan Norwood," Hannah said, moving to stand beside Nathan. "He has been helping me with the ranch." "So I have heard," the sheriff said dryly. "Folks in town have been talking." "It is not proper, Miss Foster, a single woman and a single man spending so much time together without a chaperone." Hannah felt her temper flare. "What folks in town think is not my concern, Sheriff. This is my property, and I will have whatever help I choose." "Now, do not get all riled up," the sheriff said, holding up a placating hand. "I am just looking out for your interests. A young woman's reputation is a fragile thing." "My reputation will survive," Hannah said coldly. "Was there something else you needed, Sheriff?" The sheriff's expression hardened. "As a matter of fact, there is. There has been some trouble with rustlers in the area, taking cattle from the larger ranches. I need to know if you have seen anything suspicious." "I do not have any cattle left to speak of," Hannah said. "Just 2 horses and some chickens. I doubt rustlers would be interested in my property." "Still, keep your eyes open," the sheriff said. He looked at Nathan again, his expression openly hostile now. "You are the prospector working the claim up in the hills, are you not? You spend a lot of time out in the desert. Might be you have seen something." "I keep to myself mostly," Nathan said evenly, "but I will certainly report anything unusual." "You do that," the sheriff said. He tipped his hat again, but the gesture held no warmth. "Good day, Miss Foster. Norwood." They watched the riders leave, dust rising behind them. Hannah felt Nathan tense beside her. "He does not like you," she said. "The feeling is mutual," Nathan replied. "There is something about that man that does not sit right with me. The way he talks to you, like you are a child who cannot make her own decisions. He has been trying to convince me to sell this place since my father died," Hannah said. "I think he has a buyer lined up, probably someone who would give him a cut of the sale. He is not going to be happy until I give in." "Then he is going to be unhappy for a very long time," Nathan said firmly, "because you are not giving in, and I am going to make sure of it." Hannah smiled and squeezed his hand. "My protector." "Always," Nathan said seriously. "For as long as you will let me." That night, as Nathan was preparing to leave, Hannah caught his hand. "Stay," she said softly. "It is late, and it is a long ride back to your cabin. You could sleep in the barn, or—" She trailed off, suddenly uncertain. Nathan looked at her for a long moment. "Hannah, if I stay, people will talk. The sheriff already has his suspicions." "Let them talk," Hannah said. "I do not care anymore. I care about you, about us. And I am tired of pretending that I do not want you here all the time." "Are you sure?" Nathan asked. "Once we cross this line, there is no going back. Your reputation, my reputation, is already in tatters according to the good people of Apache Junction." Hannah interrupted. "At least this way I will have earned it." She paused, then added more softly, "I am not asking you to sleep in my bed, Nathan, not yet, but I am asking you to stay to be here with me. The barn is fine if that makes you more comfortable." Nathan pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I will stay," he murmured into her hair. "And for the record, I do not want to sleep in the barn, but I will respect your boundaries, whatever they are." They compromised. Nathan stayed in the house but slept on the floor near the fireplace, despite Hannah's protests that he should take the bed. She lay in her small bedroom, listening to his quiet breathing in the other room, and felt safer than she had in months. Having him there, knowing he was close, made the night seem less lonely. He was still there when she woke before dawn, and they had coffee together as the sun rose. It felt domestic and right, like a glimpse of what their life could be. When he finally left to check on his claim, he kissed her goodbye on the porch, long and slow, and promised to return the next day. The summer heat intensified, turning the landscape into shades of brown and gold. The garden struggled despite their best efforts, and the well water ran low. Hannah worried constantly about money, about whether she could make it through another year. Nathan helped where he could, but his claim was producing less and less. They both knew that something would have to change. One sweltering afternoon in July, as they were sitting in the shade of the porch trying to escape the worst of the heat, Nathan said, "I have been thinking. What if we combined our resources, your land and my claim? Together we might be able to make something work." Hannah looked at him carefully. "What exactly are you proposing?" Nathan took her hand, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on her palm. "I am proposing that we get married, Hannah. I know it might seem fast, but I love you. I have loved you since that first Monday when I left those flowers and hoped they would make you smile. I want to build a life with you, a real life. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. I want to turn this struggling ranch into something we can be proud of. I want everything with you." Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "I love you too," she said, her voice breaking. "I have been so afraid to say it, afraid that if I admitted how much you mean to me, something would happen to take you away. But I do love you, Nathan Norwood. I love your kindness and your patience and the way you bring me flowers even though you do not have to anymore. I love the way you fix things without being asked and the way you listen when I talk. I love everything about you." "Is that a yes?" Nathan asked, smiling through his own tears. "Yes," Hannah said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Hannah felt like she was finally, truly home. They held each other in the shade of the porch while the desert stretched out around them, harsh and beautiful and full of possibility. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony in town. Mrs. Chen served as witness, along with Mr. Patterson from the general store. Sheriff Dawson was conspicuously absent, though Hannah had not expected him to attend. She wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved all these years, and Nathan wore a new shirt he had bought special for the occasion. They stood in front of the circuit preacher who happened to be passing through and exchanged vows that were heartfelt and simple. "I promise to love you all my days," Nathan said, holding both her hands in his. "I promise to stand beside you in good times and bad, to share your burdens and your joys. I promise to bring you flowers every Monday for as long as we both shall live." Hannah laughed through her tears. "I promise to love you with everything I am," she said. "I promise to be your partner and your friend, to support your dreams and build new ones with you. I promise that every day I will remember how lucky I am that you walked into my life." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed her with a tenderness that made her knees weak. They walked out of the small church into the blazing afternoon sun as Mr. and Mrs. Norwood, ready to face whatever came next together. Their wedding night was spent at the ranch, which was now officially theirs together. Nathan had moved all his belongings from the cabin, which he planned to use as a line shack for when he worked the claim. Hannah had cleaned the house from top to bottom, put fresh sheets on the bed, and picked wildflowers to fill every available container. When they were finally alone, Hannah felt suddenly nervous. Nathan seemed to sense her anxiety because he took her hands gently and said, "We do not have to do anything you are not ready for. We have all the time in the world." "I want to," Hannah said quickly. "I am just nervous. I have never." "Neither have I," Nathan admitted, and Hannah felt some of her tension ease. They were both new to this, figuring it out together. He kissed her softly, then deeper, and slowly began to unlace her dress. His hands were shaking slightly, which she found endearing. They undressed each other with fumbling fingers and quiet laughter, and when they finally came together, it was awkward and sweet and perfect in its imperfection. They learned each other's bodies in the lamplight, discovering what brought pleasure, what felt good, what made the other gasp and sigh. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, sweaty and satisfied and happier than either had thought possible. Nathan traced lazy patterns on Hannah's bare shoulder and murmured, "I cannot believe you are my wife." "I cannot believe you are my husband," Hannah replied. "Sometimes I still think I am going to wake up and find out this was all a dream, that you were never real, just something I imagined because I was so lonely." "I am very real," Nathan said, kissing her forehead, "and I am not going anywhere." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, and Hannah slept more deeply than she had in years. She woke once in the night to find Nathan watching her, his expression soft with love. "Go back to sleep," he whispered, pulling her closer. She did, feeling utterly safe and cherished. Married life suited them both. They worked the ranch together, making slow but steady improvements. Nathan's knowledge of mining and Hannah's understanding of the land complemented each other perfectly. They discovered a small seam of copper on the property, nothing that would make them rich, but enough to provide a steady income. They used the money to buy more chickens, a milk cow, and eventually a small herd of cattle. Nathan kept his promise about the flowers. Every Monday morning, Hannah would wake to find a fresh bundle on the kitchen table, gathered from wherever Nathan had been working that week. Sometimes they were the same varieties he had left on her porch all those weeks ago. Sometimes they were new discoveries. Each bouquet was a love letter, a reminder that he was thinking of her, that she was cherished. By autumn, the ranch was starting to look prosperous. The garden had finally taken hold, providing vegetables for their table and some to sell in town. The cattle were healthy, the chickens were laying well, and the copper seam was producing steadily. More importantly, Hannah was happy in a way she had never been before. She had a partner, a true equal who valued her opinions and shared her work. She had love, real love, the kind she had read about in books but never expected to find for herself. One evening in late September, as they sat on the porch watching another spectacular sunset, Hannah said, "I have been thinking about my father lately. Wishing he could have met you, seen how happy you make me." "I wish I could have known him," Nathan said. "He raised an incredible woman." "He would have liked you," Hannah said with certainty. "He always said that a man's worth is measured not by what he has, but by what he does with what he has been given. You take nothing and turn it into something beautiful, Nathan. That would have impressed him." "You are the beautiful thing I have been given," Nathan said, pulling her close. "Everything else is just details." They were so absorbed in each other that they did not notice the riders approaching until they were nearly at the house. Hannah tensed, remembering the last time unexpected visitors had arrived, but Nathan squeezed her hand reassuringly. There were 4 men, all wearing badges. Sheriff Dawson was in the lead, and his expression was grimly satisfied. "Nathan Norwood," the sheriff said without preamble, "I am placing you under arrest for cattle rustling." The world seemed to tilt. Hannah jumped to her feet, her heart pounding. "That is absurd. Nathan has been here with me. He would never save it, Mrs. Norwood," the sheriff interrupted. "We have evidence. Cattle have been disappearing from the Morrison Ranch, and witnesses have placed your husband in the area at the times of the thefts." "What witnesses?" Nathan demanded, standing slowly. Hannah could see the fury in his eyes, but he kept his voice level. "I have been working my claim in this ranch. I have not been anywhere near the Morrison place." "Mr. Morrison's foreman says different," the sheriff replied. "Now you can come quietly, or we can do this the hard way. Your choice." Hannah grabbed Nathan's arm. "Do not go with them. This is a setup, it has to be." "If I run, it will just make me look guilty," Nathan said quietly. He turned to her, framing her face with his hands. "Trust me, Hannah. The truth will come out. I have done nothing wrong, and they will have to release me." "But no buts," Nathan said firmly. "You know I would never do this. Hold on to that, and do not let them convince you otherwise." He kissed her hard, then stepped away and held out his wrists. "Let us get this over with." Sheriff Dawson actually looked disappointed that Nathan was not resisting. He cuffed him roughly and led him toward the horses. Hannah followed, protesting loudly, but the deputies held her back. She watched helplessly as they rode away with her husband, his hands bound, his head held high despite the circumstances. The moment they were out of sight, Hannah ran for her own horse. She rode into town faster than was safe, her mind racing. This was wrong, all of it. Nathan had been with her almost constantly. Even when he was at his claim, it was in the opposite direction from the Morrison Ranch. Someone was lying, but why? What did they stand to gain? She went straight to Mr. Patterson at the general store, one of the few people in town who seemed genuinely friendly toward her and Nathan. He was closing up for the evening, but let her in when he saw her distress. "What has happened?" he asked, locking the door behind her. Hannah quickly explained the situation. Mr. Patterson's expression grew darker with every word. "The Morrison Ranch, you say? That is John Morrison's spread, the biggest in the county. He is one of the richest men around here." "Why would he target Nathan?" Hannah asked desperately. "We have nothing. We are nobody." Mr. Patterson was quiet for a moment, then said carefully, "There have been rumors. Morrison has been buying up smaller properties, consolidating land. Folks say he is trying to control the whole valley. Your place sits right in the middle of several parcels he already owns." Understanding hit Hannah like a physical blow. "He wants our land, but we would never sell, so instead he is trying to get Nathan out of the way." "It is just a theory," Mr. Patterson cautioned. "But Sheriff Dawson and Morrison are known to be close. If Morrison wanted someone arrested, the sheriff would make it happen." "I need proof," Hannah said. "I need to prove Nathan was not anywhere near those cattle." "That is going to be difficult if they have a witness saying otherwise," Mr. Patterson warned. "A foreman's word carries weight." Hannah spent the night in the boarding house, unable to bear the thought of going back to the ranch alone. Mrs. Chen clucked sympathetically and brought her tea, but offered little in the way of advice. "These things have a way of working themselves out," she said vaguely. "Not if powerful men want them to work out a particular way," Hannah replied bitterly. She was at the sheriff's office when it opened the next morning, demanding to see her husband. Sheriff Dawson tried to turn her away, but Hannah planted herself in a chair and refused to move until he relented. Finally, clearly hoping to be rid of her, he led her into the small jail cell where Nathan was being held. Nathan looked tired but unbroken. He gripped the bars of the cell and said urgently, "Do not let them intimidate you, Hannah. Keep running the ranch. Do not let Morrison or anyone else pressure you into selling." "I am not worried about the ranch," Hannah said fiercely. "I am worried about you. This is a frame-up, Nathan. Morrison wants our land and he is using you to get it." "I figured as much," Nathan said grimly. "The foreman who claims to have seen me, I do not even know who he is. I have never met him." "Then how can he identify you?" "That is exactly what I asked," Nathan said. "The sheriff says the man gave a detailed description. Dark hair, tall, wearing denim and a blue shirt. That could describe half the men in Arizona." Hannah felt helpless rage building inside her. "There has to be something we can do. Someone who can testify that you were elsewhere when the cattle went missing." "It would be my word against theirs," Nathan said. "And right now, their word carries more weight." Hannah stayed as long as the sheriff would let her, holding Nathan's hand through the bars, trying to memorize the warmth of his touch. When she finally left, she felt hollowed out as if someone had scooped away her insides. She spent the next 3 days gathering evidence. She talked to everyone in town, trying to establish a timeline of Nathan's movements. She rode out to the claim and documented all the work he had been doing there, work that proved he had been busy with his own affairs, not stealing cattle. She even rode past the Morrison ranch, though she did not dare approach it directly. The preliminary hearing was held on a Thursday afternoon in the small courthouse. Hannah sat in the front row, her hands clenched in her lap, as the prosecutor laid out the case against Nathan. The Morrison foreman, a hard-faced man named Sykes, testified that he had seen Nathan near the pasture where the cattle had disappeared. He described Nathan's appearance in detail and swore he had gotten a good look at him in broad daylight. When it was the defense's turn, the court-appointed lawyer, a young man who looked barely out of school, called Hannah to the stand. She testified about Nathan's whereabouts, about his work on the claim and the ranch, about his character. But she could see the judge was not convinced. A wife's testimony in defense of her husband carried little weight, especially against the word of a respected foreman working for a powerful rancher. The judge ordered Nathan held over for trial, denying bail on the grounds that he was a flight risk. Hannah wanted to scream, to tear the courthouse apart with her bare hands. Instead, she walked out calmly and rode back to the ranch in a daze. That night, alone in the house she and Nathan had shared for such a short time, Hannah made a decision. If the law would not help her husband, she would have to help him herself. She began to plan. Over the next week, Hannah did something she had never done before. She became a detective. She watched the Morrison ranch from a distance, noting the comings and goings of the foreman and other hands. She talked to the other small ranchers in the area, asking carefully casual questions about any troubles they had experienced. Slowly, a pattern emerged. Morrison had been systematically targeting small landholders, using various methods to force them off their property. Some had been offered lowball prices and harassed until they accepted. Others had experienced mysterious accidents or livestock deaths. Still others had simply left, too frightened or too broke to stay. And in every case, Morrison had eventually acquired the land. Hannah also discovered something else. Sykes, the foreman who had accused Nathan, had a reputation. He was known as Morrison's enforcer, the man who did the dirty work. More than one person mentioned in hushed tones that Sykes was not above bending the truth if it suited his employer's interests. Armed with this information, Hannah went to see the young lawyer defending Nathan. His name was Thomas Green, and his office was barely more than a closet above the barber shop. But his eyes were sharp and intelligent, and he listened carefully as Hannah laid out everything she had learned. "It is all circumstantial," he said when she finished. "But it is a start. If we can cast enough doubt on Sykes's testimony, we might have a chance." "What do you need me to do?" Hannah asked. "Keep gathering information," Thomas said, "and pray that we find something concrete before the trial." The trial was set for mid-October. Hannah worked tirelessly, splitting her time between running the ranch, visiting Nathan, and investigating Morrison and Sykes. She was exhausted, running on coffee and determination, but she refused to give up. Nathan was her husband, her partner, her love. She would move heaven and earth to save him. 2 days before the trial was set to begin, Hannah's persistence paid off. She was in the saloon, a place she would normally never enter, asking questions of the bartender, when she overheard a conversation between 2 ranch hands. They were drinking heavily and talking louder than they should have been. "Morrison is a piece of work," one of them slurred, "making Sykes lie like that just to get rid of some poor prospector." "Hush," the other said nervously. "Someone might hear you." "Who cares?" the first one said. "Everyone knows that Norwood Fellow did not take those cattle. Half of them are probably in Morrison's own herd by now, with the brands changed." Hannah's heart nearly stopped. She moved closer, pretending to talk to the bartender while straining to hear more. The men continued drinking and talking, and with each word, the picture became clearer. Morrison had stolen his own cattle, changed the brands, and framed Nathan for the theft. Sykes had been ordered to identify Nathan, and he had done so without question, loyal to his employer above all else. Hannah slipped out of the saloon and ran straight to Thomas Green's office. He was working late, lamplight showing under his door. When she burst in and told him what she had heard, his face lit up. "Can you get those men to testify?" he asked. "I do not know," Hannah admitted. "They were drunk. They might not even remember what they said, or they might be too afraid of Morrison to speak up." "We have to try," Thomas said. "This could be the break we need." They tracked down the 2 ranch hands that night. One refused to talk, too terrified of losing his job and worse. But the other, a younger man named Billy, was troubled by what he knew. Hannah could see the conflict on his face as Thomas explained what was at stake. "A man could go to prison for years for something he did not do," Thomas said. "Is that the kind of thing you want on your conscience?" Billy looked at Hannah, saw the desperation in her eyes. Finally, he nodded. "I will testify, but only if you can promise Morrison will not come after me." "I cannot promise that," Thomas said honestly, "but I can promise that telling the truth is the right thing to do." The trial began on a crisp October morning. The courthouse was packed with curious townspeople, all eager to see the drama unfold. Hannah sat behind the defense table, her hands clasped so tightly they ached. Nathan turned to look at her, and she tried to project confidence she did not feel. The prosecution went first, calling Sykes to repeat his testimony. He was confident and convincing, describing in detail how he had seen Nathan near the stolen cattle. But when Thomas cross-examined him, cracks began to appear in his story. Thomas pressed him on the details, the exact time and location, the weather conditions, what Nathan had been wearing. Sykes's answers grew vaguer, more uncertain. Then Thomas called Billy to the stand. The young ranch hand was clearly terrified, his voice shaking as he took the oath. But once he started talking, the words poured out. He described the conversation he had overheard between Morrison and Sykes, the plan to frame Nathan, the admission that Morrison had stolen his own cattle to create a pretext. The courtroom erupted in gasps and whispers. The prosecutor objected strenuously, calling Billy's testimony hearsay. The judge looked troubled but allowed it to stand, noting that it went to the credibility of the prosecution's main witness. Thomas, then produced Hannah's notes and testimony from other small ranchers about Morrison's pattern of behavior. Piece by piece, he built a case that this was not an isolated incident but part of a larger scheme. When it was time for closing arguments, Thomas spoke with passion about justice and truth, about the danger of allowing powerful men to manipulate the legal system for their own gain. The prosecutor countered that the defense was relying on speculation and the testimony of unreliable witnesses. It was up to the jury now. They deliberated for 6 hours. Hannah spent every minute of that time in an agony of suspense, unable to eat or drink or think about anything except Nathan's fate. When the jury finally filed back in, she could not read their expressions. The foreman stood. "We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty." Hannah burst into tears of relief. The courtroom erupted in cheers and shouts, some supportive, some outraged. The judge banged his gavel for order, but it took several minutes for the noise to die down. When it did, he addressed Nathan directly. "Mr. Norwood, you are free to go, and let the record show that this court takes a very dim view of false testimony and abuse of process." His eyes found Sykes in the crowd, then moved to where John Morrison sat in the back row. "If I find evidence of criminal conduct in this matter, charges will be filed." Nathan was released immediately. He and Hannah met in the middle of the courtroom, holding each other so tightly it almost hurt. Hannah was sobbing openly now, all the fear and stress of the past weeks pouring out of her. Nathan buried his face in her hair and murmured reassurances, his own voice rough with emotion. They walked out of the courthouse together into the afternoon sunshine, and it felt like being reborn. People stopped them on the street to offer congratulations, even some who had been skeptical before. The tide of public opinion had turned sharply against Morrison, and rumors were already flying that the sheriff would face consequences for his role in the prosecution. That night back at their ranch, Nathan and Hannah lay in bed wrapped in each other's arms. They had made love with a fierce intensity, a reaffirmation of life and love after coming so close to losing everything. Now, in the quiet aftermath, they talked softly. "I was so afraid," Hannah admitted. "I tried to be strong, to have faith, but I was terrified I would lose you." "You saved me," Nathan said simply. "Your faith, your determination, your refusal to give up even when it seemed hopeless. You are the strongest person I know, Hannah Norwood." "We saved each other," Hannah corrected. "From the first Monday you left those flowers, we have been saving each other." Nathan kissed her forehead. "I kept thinking about those flowers while I was in that cell, remembering how nervous I was the first time I picked them, wondering if you would think I was insane." "Seems like a lifetime ago now." "It was only a few months," Hannah marveled. "How is it possible to feel this much in such a short time?" "I think we were both ready," Nathan said. "Ready to be loved, ready to love, we just needed to find each other." They fell asleep like that, tangled together, safe and whole and together. Whatever came next, they would face it as partners. The aftermath of the trial brought unexpected changes. Sheriff Dawson resigned under pressure, and a new sheriff was elected, one with no ties to Morrison. John Morrison himself faced investigation for fraud and conspiracy, though his wealth and connections meant he avoided serious consequences. Sykes disappeared, probably run off by Morrison to avoid further testimony. Billy, the ranch hand who had testified, was given a job on a ranch on the other side of the county, far from Morrison's reach. As for Nathan and Hannah, the trial had an unexpected positive effect. The publicity had made them known throughout the region, and people remembered that they had stood up to a powerful man, and won. Other small ranchers began to seek them out, asking for advice or assistance in dealing with similar problems. Nathan and Hannah found themselves at the center of an informal alliance of small landholders, all determined to protect their rights against wealthy ranchers trying to consolidate power. But more importantly, the experience had strengthened their marriage. They had been tested in the crucible of adversity and emerged stronger, more united. They knew they could weather any storm as long as they faced it together. Winter came to the desert, bringing cooler temperatures and occasional rain. The ranch thrived under their joint management. They were not rich, but they were comfortable, and that was more than enough. Nathan continued to work the copper seam, which provided a steady income, while Hannah managed the livestock and garden. They made decisions together, planned together, dreamed together. On a Monday morning in early December, Hannah woke to find Nathan already up, standing on the porch with something in his hands. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and joined him, the morning air crisp and cold. "You are up early," she said, slipping her arm around his waist. "I wanted to watch the sunrise with you," Nathan said. He handed her what he had been holding, a bundle of wildflowers, winter varieties that bloomed despite the cold. Desert marigolds and brittlebush, their yellow petals bright against the muted landscape. "You still do this," Hannah said softly, touched beyond words. "Every Monday." "I promised you I would," Nathan reminded her, "for as long as we both shall live. Besides, it reminds me of where we started, of how lucky I am that I took a chance and left those first flowers on your porch." Hannah stood on her toes to kiss him. "I am the lucky one. You could have walked away that first morning, could have decided I was not worth the effort. Instead, you gave me flowers and kindness and patience, and eventually you gave me yourself. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Nathan said, echoing her words from months ago. "That is what love is, Hannah. Not one person saving the other, but both people choosing each other, again and again, no matter what." They stood together watching the sun paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, the flowers bright between them, and Hannah felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. This was what she had been searching for without knowing it. Not just love, but partnership. Not just someone to share her life with, but someone who made her life better, fuller, richer in every way. Christmas came, and they celebrated quietly, just the two of them. They had little money for gifts, but Nathan gave Hannah a small wooden box he had carved himself, inlaid with copper from his claim. Inside was a piece of paper with a poem written in his neat hand, verses about wildflowers and the desert and a woman who had stolen his heart. Hannah gave him a new shirt she had sewn, using fabric she had saved for months to afford, and a journal for writing his thoughts and observations. They sat by the fire and exchanged gifts, and the simple intimacy of the moment was worth more than any expensive present. As the new year of 1884 arrived, Hannah began to suspect she might be pregnant. She did not say anything to Nathan at first, afraid to hope, afraid to jinx it. But as the weeks passed and her suspicions grew stronger, she finally told him one evening after dinner. Nathan's face went through a series of expressions: shock, joy, fear, then pure elation. "A baby," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We are going to have a baby, I think so," Hannah said. "I am not certain yet, but all the signs are there." Nathan swept her into his arms, laughing and spinning her around until she protested that he was making her dizzy. He set her down carefully, as if she were made of glass, and placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Our baby," he said wonderingly, "a whole new person made from our love." "Are you happy?" Hannah asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Nathan said. "I am terrified and thrilled and amazed all at once. We are going to be parents, Hannah. We are going to have a family." The pregnancy was confirmed by the doctor in town a few weeks later. Hannah was healthy and strong, he said, and if she continued to take care of herself, she should have no problems. The baby would arrive sometime in late summer or early September. Nathan became even more protective than before, constantly worrying that Hannah was working too hard or lifting something too heavy. She found it endearing and exasperating in equal measure. "I am pregnant, not dying," she told him more than once. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time." "Not my woman carrying my baby," Nathan replied stubbornly. "I am allowed to worry." "You are allowed to worry a reasonable amount," Hannah conceded, "but you cannot wrap me in cotton wool for 9 months. I still have work to do." They compromised, as they did about most things. Hannah continued to work but let Nathan take on the heavier tasks. She focused on the garden and the chickens and planning for the baby. Nathan built a cradle from wood he had carefully selected and sanded until it was smooth as silk. They talked for hours about names and the future, and what kind of parents they wanted to be. Spring arrived, bringing wildflowers in abundance. Nathan's Monday bouquets grew larger and more elaborate as the desert bloomed. Purple lupines and scarlet Indian paintbrush, golden brittlebush and pink fairy dusters, white evening primrose and orange globe mallow. Hannah put them in every room of the house, bright spots of color that made her smile every time she saw them. As her belly grew round with their child, Hannah felt a sense of completeness she had never experienced before. She had thought herself happy with Nathan, but this was different, deeper. They were creating something new together, a whole person who would carry both of them forward into the future. It was terrifying and wonderful and more real than anything she had ever experienced. In late August, on a hot afternoon when the air shimmered with heat, Hannah's labor began. Nathan had been prepared for weeks, having arranged for Mrs. Chen to come stay with them when the time arrived. But when Hannah's water broke and the contractions started in earnest, he panicked anyway, running around the house gathering supplies and getting in everyone's way. "Nathan, my love, you need to calm down," Hannah said between contractions, trying not to laugh at his frantic energy. "This is a natural process. Everything is going to be fine." "You are in pain," Nathan said, looking stricken. "I cannot stand seeing you in pain." "It is worth it," Hannah assured him. "Soon we will have our baby and you will forget all about this part." Mrs. Chen, who had delivered many babies in her time, shooed Nathan out of the bedroom. "You are making her nervous," she said firmly. "Go boil water, fetch towels, do something useful instead of hovering." The labor was long and difficult. Hannah had not expected it to be easy, but the reality was harder than she had imagined. Hours passed in a blur of pain and effort, Mrs. Chen's calm voice guiding her through each contraction, telling her when to push and when to rest. She could hear Nathan pacing in the other room, his footsteps a constant rhythm that was somehow comforting. Finally, as the sun was setting and golden light slanted through the window, their baby was born. The first cry split the air, strong and healthy, and Hannah felt tears streaming down her face. Mrs. Chen wrapped the baby in a clean blanket and placed the tiny bundle in Hannah's arms. "A boy," she announced with a smile. "A fine, healthy boy." Hannah looked down at her son, marveling at his tiny features, his perfect little fingers curled into fists. He had Nathan's dark hair and her nose, and he was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Welcome to the world." Nathan burst into the room, Mrs. Chen's protests forgotten. He stopped at the foot of the bed, staring at his wife and child with an expression of absolute wonder. "Is he?" "He is perfect," Hannah said, smiling through her exhaustion. "Come meet your son." Nathan approached slowly, almost reverently, and sat carefully on the edge of the bed. Hannah placed the baby in his arms and Nathan's face crumpled with emotion. "He is so small," he breathed. "So perfect. Look at him, Hannah. We made this. We made a person." "We did," Hannah agreed. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months but never settled on anything definite. Now, looking at their son, Nathan said, "What about Samuel? It means heard by God. We were both so alone when we found each other, but it felt like our prayers had been answered. Maybe his name can remind us of that." "Samuel Norwood," Hannah said, testing it out. "I love it. Hello, Samuel. I am your mother and this is your father, and we love you more than you will ever know." The first weeks with a newborn were exhausting and overwhelming and wonderful. Samuel was a good baby, healthy and strong, but he still needed constant care. Hannah and Nathan took turns walking him when he fussed, changing his diapers, marveling at every little sound and movement. They were running on very little sleep, but neither of them complained. This was what they had wanted, what they had dreamed of. Nathan continued to bring flowers every Monday, even with the chaos of new parenthood. He would place them on the table while holding Samuel in his other arm, and the image made Hannah's heart swell. This was her family, her life, everything she had never dared to hope for. As Samuel grew from a tiny newborn into a chubby, alert infant, the ranch continued to thrive. The copper seam held out, providing steady income. The cattle herd grew. The garden produced abundantly. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. On a Monday morning in late September, as autumn began to touch the desert with cooler temperatures, Hannah stood on the porch holding Samuel while Nathan prepared to ride out to check the herd. He paused to give her a bundle of wildflowers as he had done every Monday for over a year and a half now. "You know what today is?" Hannah asked. Nathan thought for a moment, then his eyes widened. "The anniversary of when we met. When I finally introduced myself after 14 weeks of leaving flowers." 14 weeks that changed my life," Hannah said softly. "I was so lost back then, Nathan. I did not even realize how lost until you showed me what it was like to be found." Nathan cupped her cheek with his hand, his thumb gentle on her skin. "You were never lost, my love. You were just waiting for the right person to see you. And I am so grateful that I was that person, that I got to be the one who earned your love." They kissed while Samuel made happy, gurgling sounds between them, and Hannah felt like her heart might burst with the fullness of it all. This was happiness, real and solid and earned through struggle and sacrifice and choosing each other every single day. The years that followed were not without challenges. There were droughts that tested their resources, illnesses that frightened them, moments when money was tight and the future uncertain. But they faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each obstacle overcome. Nathan kept bringing flowers every Monday, without fail, even when he was sick or injured or exhausted from work. It became a ritual that marked their weeks, a constant reminder of how their love had begun. Hannah kept every dried flower, pressing them between the pages of books, creating a botanical record of their years together. They had 3 more children in the years that followed Samuel. A daughter they named Emma, another son they called Thomas, and finally another daughter, little Claire. The house that had once felt so empty and lonely was now bursting with life and noise and love. The children grew up knowing the story of the Monday flowers, of how their father had courted their mother with wildflowers and patience and quiet devotion. Samuel grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved to help his father work the claim. Emma was wild and adventurous, always exploring, always asking questions. Thomas was gentle and artistic, spending hours drawing the desert landscape. Claire was still a baby, but already showing signs of her mother's determination and her father's kindness. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nathan took Hannah back to the spot where he had picked the first bundle of wildflowers, all those years ago. The children were staying with Mrs. Chen for the night, giving them a rare evening alone. They sat on the ground as the sun set, surrounded by blooming desert plants, and talked about everything and nothing. "You ever regret it?" Nathan asked suddenly. "Taking a chance on me, a poor prospector with nothing to offer but flowers." Hannah looked at him in amazement. "How could you even ask that? You gave me everything, Nathan. You gave me love and partnership and a family. You gave me a life worth living. I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Even the trial, even the fear and the struggle." "Especially the trial," Hannah said firmly. "Because that is when I learned what we are truly made of, when I learned that nothing can break us as long as we are together. The hard times just made the good times sweeter." Nathan pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "I love you, Hannah Norwood. I have loved you since the moment I saw you standing on that porch looking so beautiful and so sad. I will love you until the day I die and beyond, if there is anything beyond." "I love you too," Hannah murmured. "More than words can say." They stayed there until the stars came out, holding each other in the quiet desert night, and it felt like coming full circle. They had started with flowers and silence, and now they had everything. Love, family, a life built together from nothing but determination and hope. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and growth. Samuel grew old enough to help seriously with the ranch work. Emma learned to ride like she was born on a horse. Thomas filled notebooks with sketches and observations. Claire toddled after her older siblings, trying to keep up. The ranch expanded, became prosperous in a modest way. The copper seam eventually played out, but by then they had diversified enough that it did not matter. Nathan's hair began to show gray at the temples, and Hannah found laugh lines forming at the corners of her eyes. They were aging together, growing into the life they had built. And every Monday, without fail, Nathan still brought her flowers. On one particular Monday morning, when Hannah was 43 and Nathan was 46, she woke to find him already up and gone. This was unusual, as he typically woke her with coffee and flowers. She dressed and went outside, wondering where he had gotten to. What she found made her stop in her tracks. The entire porch was covered in wildflowers, hundreds of them, every variety that grew in the desert. They were arranged in bundles and scattered loose, creating a carpet of color that took her breath away. And in the middle of it all stood Nathan, holding a single perfect bloom. "What is all this?" Hannah asked, though her eyes were already filling with tears. "This is 1,000 Mondays," Nathan said simply. 1,000 weeks of loving you, of bringing you flowers, of choosing you over and over again. I wanted to mark the occasion properly." Hannah did the math quickly. Nearly 20 years. They had been together for nearly 20 years, and he had brought her flowers every single Monday. She could not speak, could only walk into his arms and hold him tight while happy tears streamed down her face. Their children, who had been hiding around the corner, came running out then. Samuel, now a young man of 19, Emma at 17, Thomas at 15, and Claire at 12. They had all helped with the surprise, gathering flowers at dawn while their mother slept. "To the best parents in the world," Samuel said, raising an imaginary glass in a toast. "To Monday flowers and true love," Emma added with a grin. "To family," Thomas said quietly. "To forever," Claire finished, hugging both her parents. They spent the day celebrating, the 6 of them, eating Hannah's famous apple pie and telling stories and laughing until their sides hurt. It was a perfect day, the kind that stands out in memory as a marker of pure joy. As evening fell and the children drifted off to their own pursuits, Nathan and Hannah sat on the porch surrounded by the slowly wilting flowers. Hannah leaned against her husband's shoulder and sighed contentedly. "You know what I realized," she said. I never thanked you properly for that first Monday, for having the courage to leave those flowers even though you had no idea how I would react. You thanked me by loving me back, Nathan said. That was more than I ever expected or deserved. We both deserved this, Hannah said firmly. We deserved happiness and love and everything we have built together. And I want you to know that I have cherished every single Monday, every single flower, every moment of the life we have shared. Nathan turned to kiss her, and it was as sweet and full of promise as their first kiss all those years ago on this same porch. Some things changed with time, but this never did. The way they loved each other, completely and without reservation. The years ahead would bring more changes. Their children would grow up and start lives of their own. Samuel would take over most of the ranch operations, eventually marrying a teacher from town and having children of his own. Emma would become an advocate for women's rights, fighting for the vote and equal treatment. Thomas would move to San Francisco to study art, though he always came home for visits. Claire would follow her mother's path, marrying a good man and building her own ranch nearby. Nathan and Hannah would grow old together, their bodies aging but their love never diminishing. They would see grandchildren born, would watch the world change around them, would face loss and joy in equal measure. And through it all, every Monday without fail, Nathan would bring Hannah flowers. On a Monday morning in the spring of 1913, when Hannah was 72 and Nathan was 75, he woke early as always. His joints ached and his back was stiff, but he pulled on his clothes and walked slowly out into the desert. The wildflowers were blooming as they always did in spring, and he gathered a small bundle with care. His hands were not as steady as they once were, and it took him longer to tie the twine, but he managed it. When he returned to the house, Hannah was awake, sitting in her rocking chair on the porch. She smiled when she saw him, and the sight of that smile still made his heart skip a beat, even after 30 years of marriage. "Good morning, my love," he said, presenting the flowers with a small bow. "Your Monday flowers. You do not have to keep doing this," Hannah said gently, though she took the flowers with obvious pleasure. "We are old, Nathan. No one expects grand romantic gestures from old people." "I am not doing it for anyone else," Nathan said, sitting carefully in the chair beside hers. "I am doing it for us, because I promised you I would bring you flowers every Monday for as long as we both shall live, and I always keep my promises to you." Hannah reached over and took his hand, their fingers interlacing with the ease of long practice. "You have given me such a beautiful life," she said. "More beautiful than I ever dreamed possible." "We gave each other a beautiful life," Nathan corrected, as he always did. "That is what marriage is, Hannah. Two people creating something together that neither could make alone." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun rise over the desert they both loved. The same desert where Nathan had first picked wildflowers with trembling hands, hoping to bring joy to a sad young woman he had never even spoken to. The same desert that had tested them and shaped them and ultimately blessed them beyond measure. "You remember that first Monday?" Hannah asked softly. "When you finally knocked on my door after 14 weeks, like it was yesterday," Nathan said. "I was so nervous I thought I might be sick. I had no idea if you would be angry or scared or happy to see me. But you were kind, and you invited me in for coffee, and I knew right then that you were going to change my life." "We changed each other's lives," Hannah said. "We saved each other in all the ways that matter." Nathan brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "And I would do it all again, every moment, just to end up here with you." They continued to sit together as the world woke around them, an old couple surrounded by flowers, bound together by love and promises kept, and 30 years of Monday mornings. Their story had begun with wildflowers and silence, with tentative hope and careful devotion. It had grown into something rich and deep and enduring, a love that had weathered every storm and emerged stronger. The flowers on Hannah's lap were already beginning to wilt in the morning heat, but she held them carefully anyway. These were not just flowers, they were symbols of everything they had built together. Every Monday for 30 years, through sickness and health, poverty and prosperity, joy and sorrow, Nathan had kept his promise. And every Monday for 30 years, Hannah had received them with a grateful heart. This was their legacy, not wealth or fame or conquest, but simple, consistent love. The kind of love that shows up every Monday with flowers. The kind of love that builds a life one day at a time, one choice at a time, one flower at a time. The kind of love that lasts. As they sat on the porch of the ranch they had saved together, surrounded by the family they had created, with 3 decades of memories behind them and whatever time remained ahead of them, Nathan and Hannah knew they had found something precious and rare. They had found each other in a harsh land that did not suffer fools or weak hearts. They had chosen each other again and again, through 14 weeks of flowers and a lifetime of Mondays. And that, in the end, was the truest love story of all. Not the dramatic gestures or the grand speeches, but the quiet devotion of one person bringing flowers to another, every week, without fail, for 30 years. It was love in its purest form, steadfast, patient, and enduring as the desert itself. The wildflowers would bloom and fade with the seasons, as they always had. The desert would endure, as it always did. And for as long as they both drew breath, Nathan would bring Hannah flowers every Monday morning, a promise kept and a love celebrated, week after week, year after year, until the very end of their days together.